"Mommy, don't leave us!" cried the little beggar girls as they were abandoned on the roadside. But their mother had no idea what was inside the suitcases their deceased father had left them. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of the engine fading away echoed along the dusty highway like a final gasp of hope. The young, widowed mother, 25, pressed the accelerator harder, as if speed could erase the image she had just burned into her memory forever. Her two small daughters standing in the middle of the road, clutching the worn suitcases their father had specifically left for them. The 4-year-old, who looked no older than 2 due to the severe malnourishment that had ravaged her frail body in recent months, squeezed her little sister's hand even tighter, also 4. Their big, dark eyes followed the car until it became just a distant speck on the horizon of the chaotic metropolis that stretched out before them. "Mommy will come back," she whispered to her sister, who was crying silently. Her words came out shaky, but filled with a determination that shouldn't exist in someone so small. The 2 suitcases beside them were all that remained of the hard-working construction worker who had been their father, a simple man who always came home with his hands covered in concrete and a tired smile on his face. The pain of the recent loss still cut through the mother's heart like a sharp blade. 3 months had passed since her husband's sudden death, 3 months of bills piling up, an empty fridge, and sleepless nights trying to figure out how to feed 2 small children with an income that barely covered the rent on a small apartment in the projects. The most painful decision of her life had been made the previous dawn when she found her daughters sharing a piece of stale bread that was all that was left in the house. On the busy streets of downtown Manhattan, the widowed millionaire, 30, adjusted the rearview mirror of his imported car as he headed to yet another business meeting. His striking appearance, reminiscent of a soap opera heartthrob, contrasted with the melancholic expression he had worn on his face for months. The fortune he had accumulated through investments in Wall Street stocks and Bitcoin seemed meaningless, since his wife had passed away, leaving a void that all his wealth couldn't fill. In his private office, an unopened letter had been lying on his mahogany desk for months. His wife had left that envelope with his name written in delicate handwriting, but he had never found the courage to open it. Some wounds were too deep to touch, and that letter represented words he might not be ready to hear. Across town, the desperate mother parked the borrowed car in front of an industrial warehouse where she had landed a temporary job in nighttime cleaning. It was the first of 3 jobs she had taken on in recent days, an exhausting marathon with only one goal: to save enough money to get her daughters back. With each hour worked, a piece of her heart broke a little more, but the determination to win back her family kept her going. Meanwhile, the 2 girls walked through the streets of the low-income neighborhood, dragging suitcases that were too heavy for their little arms. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, but the older girl had learned to ignore her own pain to protect her sister. They found shelter under an abandoned awning, where they opened one of the suitcases for the first time since their father had given them to their mother shortly before he died. Inside the suitcase, yellowed papers and folded documents were mixed with some old clothes. To the girls, they were just worthless memories of a father who would never return. The older girl picked up some of the papers and began to draw on the back with a broken pencil she found on the ground, creating small birds and flowers to distract her sister from the hunger and the cold. The millionaire had changed his route that afternoon, deciding to drive through a part of town he normally avoided. Something had prompted him to take a different path, a strange restlessness he couldn't explain. When he spotted the 2 small figures under the awning, his heart clenched in a way it hadn't in a long time. He stopped the car and approached slowly. The older girl looked up, instinctively placing herself in front of her sister in a protective gesture that touched something deep inside him. There was a strength in that little gaze, a determination that contrasted with the apparent fragility of her malnourished body. "Are you hungry?" he asked, crouching down to be at the girl's level. The answer came not in words, but in the sound of their empty stomachs and the trembling of their small hands. At that moment, the successful businessman didn't think about fortune or investments. He only thought about two children who needed help, and how his own lonely childhood in expensive boarding schools had been filled with everything except the love he saw plastered on the face of that girl, protecting her sister. The decision to offer them a meal out of compassion turned into something much bigger when he realized he couldn't just leave them there and go on with his life. There was something inexplicable about that encounter, a connection that defied any business logic he knew. 3 weeks had passed since the millionaire had taken the two girls to his mansion in the suburbs. What had started as a momentary act of compassion had turned into something he couldn't explain even to himself. The house, once silent and cold, like a mausoleum of memories, now echoed with children's laughter and small footsteps running through the marble hallways. The older girl had adapted with an ease that was both impressive and worrying. She took care of her sister with a dedication that broke the man's heart, constantly reminding him that those children had faced suffering that no child should know. Their new clothes seemed too big on their bodies, still marked by malnutrition, but their eyes were beginning to regain a sparkle that had been missing for too long. During the mornings, while the businessman tried to maintain his work routine, he realized how his home office had become a different place. The girls played silently in the garden, visible through the window, and he found himself watching them more than paying attention to the financial reports piling up on his desk. His dividends and investments in funds seemed like distant matters compared to the shy smile that the younger girl had given him the night before. Across town, the desperate mother was finishing her shift at the second job of the day. Her hands were raw from cleaning industrial floors, and her feet ached inside the worn shoes that were the only ones she owned. The money she managed to save grew slowly. Each bill saved with the care of someone who knew it represented one more hour away from her daughters. In her small boarding house room, she had transformed the cleaning of her husband's belongings into a painful but necessary ritual. Each piece of clothing, each work tool was carefully examined, hoping to find something that could help her understand his last days of life. Conversations with neighbors revealed confusing fragments about important documents and land, but she had always believed they were just worthless memories of a simple man. On a rainy afternoon, the older girl found herself playing alone in the mansion's garden while her sister napped. The 2 suitcases they had carried for so long were stored in the room that the millionaire had prepared for them, but childish curiosity led her to open them again. The yellowed papers she had once used to draw on seemed different under the soft afternoon light. It was at this moment that the retired lawyer, 67, decided to take his daily walk through the park near the mansion. His slow and calculated steps reflected decades of legal experience, and his eyes, trained for legal details, still worked with the precision of an expert. When he saw the girl sitting on the lawn with papers scattered around, something in her concentrated posture caught his attention. "What beautiful drawings you're making," he said, approaching the fence that separated the property from the public park. The girl looked up and smiled, showing some of the papers she had taken out of the suitcase. What the lawyer saw made his heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Those weren't ordinary papers. Even from a distance, he could identify official seals, notary stamps, and a formatting he immediately recognized. His 4 decades of experience dealing with legal documents screamed that he was looking at something of extreme importance, possibly deeds or property records. "May I see those papers up close?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to scare the child. The girl, with the innocent trust that only children possess, passed some of the documents through the fence. What the lawyer read in the first paragraphs confirmed his most optimistic suspicions and left him deeply disturbed at the same time. Inside the mansion, the millionaire was trying to concentrate on an important video conference about his investments in stocks, but his mind constantly wandered to the two small presences that had transformed his routine. When he finished the meeting, he decided to formalize the girl's situation by seeking proper social assistance. He couldn't continue caring for them informally without documentation or legal authorization. It was when he tried to register the girls temporarily under his care that the first big surprise hit him like a punch to the gut. There were no official records of them in any system. It was as if they had never officially existed. No birth certificates, no school records, no document that proved their legal existence. The discovery left him deeply disturbed. How could two children simply not exist in the system? His business mind, accustomed to solving complex problems, found itself facing a mystery that defied any bureaucratic logic he knew. Meanwhile, across town, the mother made a discovery that would completely change her perspective on the last few months. While cleaning her husband's closet for the third time, she decided to examine his favorite work shirt more carefully, the one he wore on the most important days. Her fingers, accustomed to sewing small repairs, noticed something strange in the inside pocket. There was a small opening, almost imperceptible, that seemed to have been made on purpose. Inside it, sewn with meticulous care, was a small golden key that she had never seen before. The shape was unusual. It didn't look like house or car keys. It was different, more elaborate, as if it were designed for something special. The discovery of the key brought an avalanche of questions she didn't know how to answer. Why would her husband hide a key from her? What did it open? And why had he taken so much care to keep it safe, sewn into a place where only a very careful examination could find it? That night, the millionaire ate dinner alone at the large table in his house, but he could hear the soft voices of the girls upstairs, where a housekeeper was helping them with their bath. The sound of their laughter echoed up the stairs, filling a void he hadn't realized existed until they arrived. His own lonely childhood in expensive boarding schools came back to him with painful clarity. He remembered the silent dormitories, the formal meals where conversations were discouraged, the constant feeling of abandonment, even surrounded by luxury and top-notch education. He had vowed that he would never let a child feel that loneliness, but until now he had never had the opportunity to fulfill that promise to himself. The internal conflict that was growing inside him was more complex than any business negotiation he had ever faced. Part of him wanted to protect those girls with all his wealth and influence, to give them the loving home he had never had. But another part feared becoming too attached, feared that his inexperience as a father figure could harm them more than help them. The next morning, the retired lawyer returned to the park with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He had spent the night analyzing the fragments of documents he had managed to see, and his conclusions were so extraordinary that he needed to confirm every detail. Those papers could represent much more than a simple family could imagine. The retired lawyer had spent 3 days meticulously examining the fragments of documents he had managed to glimpse through the fence. His legal experience screamed that he was facing something extraordinary, but he needed more evidence before making any decisions. When he returned to the park for the 4th time, he found the millionaire talking to the girls in the garden. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said, approaching respectfully. "I'm a retired lawyer, and I noticed that the girl has some interesting papers. May I speak with you about them?" The millionaire, who was still struggling with the mystery of the children's non-existent records, saw the lawyer's approach as a possible light at the end of the tunnel. He invited him in, and what followed completely changed the perspective of everyone involved. When the lawyer examined the documents from the suitcases with professional care, his hands trembled slightly. Those papers proved that the girl's father was the legitimate owner of vast tracts of land in the metropolitan area. Lands that were now worth a considerable fortune, enough to turn any working-class family into millionaires overnight. "These documents are authentic," he said, adjusting his glasses as he examined each seal and stamp. "I'm seeing property deeds, registry records, and documentation proving legal ownership of at least 5 different plots of land in the urban zone. If these lands still exist, we're talking about assets worth several million." The millionaire felt his stomach clench. Part of his companies had acquired land in the same area in recent years, always through transactions that seemed legal and well documented. The possibility that some of those acquisitions could be connected to the girl's documents created a complex scenario he wasn't prepared to face. Meanwhile, across town, the mother had made a courageous decision. The mysterious key found in her husband's shirt had tormented her for days, and she decided to seek help to find out what it opened. She visited 3 different locksmiths, but none could identify the specific type of lock the key was designed for. It was the 4th locksmith, an elderly man who had been working in the trade for 50 years, who finally gave her the answer she was looking for. "This is a bank-safe deposit box key," he said, examining the golden metal under a magnifying glass. "Based on the shape and weight, I'd say it's from one of the big banks downtown. Each key has an identification number engraved here on the handle." The revelation left the mother stunned. Her husband had never mentioned having a bank-safe deposit box. How could a construction worker have enough resources to maintain a safe in a bank? And why would he hide that from her, especially considering the financial difficulties they faced? At the bank, indicated by the key's number, she discovered that there was indeed a safe deposit box registered in her husband's name. The employee explained that the safe had been rented 2 years ago and that the payment was up to date until the end of that year. To access it, she would need to present documents proving she was the owner's widow. When she finally opened the safe 3 days later, what she found exceeded her wildest expectations. In addition to a significant amount of cash, more than she would earn in 5 years of work, there was also a folder with documents that made her head spin. The papers revealed that her husband had discovered irregularities in several land transactions in the area where he worked. There were copies of documents, photographs of altered records, and detailed notes about a construction company that was apparently forging documents to appropriate land from working-class families. One of the most disturbing notes was written in her husband's characteristic handwriting. "They found out I know the truth. I need to protect the girls and leave evidence in case something happens to me. The original deeds are with them." Reading that sentence made the world spin around the mother. Her husband had foreseen that something could happen to him. He had hidden evidence of a criminal scheme and somehow had connected all of this to the mysterious suitcases he had specifically left for his daughters. On that same day, the millionaire faced his own devastating revelation. Driven by the conversation with the retired lawyer and the need to better understand his own situation, he finally decided to open the letter his wife had left months before she died. The delicate handwriting he knew so well began with words that made his heart stop. "My love, if you're reading this letter, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you personally what I discovered about your family's business." The following pages revealed that his wife had discovered irregularities in land acquisitions made by the family business. She had hired a private investigator and discovered that many of the properties that formed the basis of their fortune had been acquired through forged documents, taking advantage of working-class families who didn't have the resources to challenge the transactions. "I wanted to tell you in person," the letter continued, "but I know how much you love your family and how devastating it would be to discover that the fortune built by generations was based on the suffering of others. I hired a lawyer to investigate more deeply, but I need time to find the right way to deal with this." The letter ended with a promise that now proved prophetic. "I will find a way to do justice without completely destroying our lives. There are families who have been harmed and deserve to recover what belongs to them." The discovery left the millionaire in a state of shock. His wife had died before she could tell the truth, taking with her the weight of a secret that could have changed everything. And now, by a cruel twist of fate, he found himself caring for two children whose lives had been affected by the same scheme that had enriched his family. The retired lawyer, realizing the man's emotional state after reading the letter, offered his help to investigate further the connection between the girl's documents and the companies involved. His motivation was not only professional. There was something in the determination of those little children that struck a sensitive chord in his grandfather's heart. During the following days, the investigation revealed a complex web of forgeries and misappropriations that involved at least 10 working-class families over 5 years. The construction company responsible for the scheme had specialized in identifying vulnerable families, especially those who had lost the head of the household, to forge documents and claim ownership of their land. The mother, now with financial resources and concrete evidence of the crime, hired a private investigator to locate her daughters. She didn't yet know that they were alive and well cared for, but the determination to get them back had become an obsession that consumed every hour of her days. When the investigator finally located the girls at the millionaire's mansion, the discovery created a devastating moral dilemma. Her daughters were clearly well cared for, recovering from malnutrition and living in conditions she could never offer. But the connection between the man who cared for them and the scheme that had destroyed her family created a complex situation that defied any simple solution. The investigator, following professional ethics, informed both the mother and the authorities about the children's location. What he didn't expect was to discover that the investigator was, in fact, the same retired lawyer who had found the girls in the park and who had been a partner with their father years ago when he was still actively practicing law. The revelation that the retired lawyer was the same investigator hired by the mother and former partner of the girl's father created a connection that no one could have foreseen. During his last conversation before retiring, the girl's father had sought out his former legal partner to discuss the irregularities he had discovered. But the conversation was interrupted by an emergency on the construction site, and they never managed to meet again. "I waited for months for him to contact me again," the lawyer revealed to the millionaire and the mother during their first tense meeting in his law office. "When I heard about his sudden death, I tried to locate the family, but you had moved and I lost track. I never imagined that years later I would find his daughters by chance in a park." The mother, sitting stiffly in the leather chair, looked at the millionaire with a mixture of anger, confusion, and pain that made the air in the room seem charged with electricity. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the evidence she had found in her husband's safe deposit box, proof that directly connected his family company to the scheme that had destroyed her life. "You knew," she said, her voice cutting like broken glass. "Your family built its fortune by stealing from people like us, and now you're taking care of my daughters as if it were an act of charity." The millionaire felt each word like a stab. He had spent weeks caring for the girls, developing a genuine paternal love he had never imagined possible, and now he discovered that his own wealth was tainted by the suffering of their family. "I didn't know," he replied, his voice laden with painful honesty. "I only found out about the irregularities a few days ago when I read the letter my wife left. She had discovered everything and was trying to find a way to do justice." At that moment, the office door opened, and the two girls ran in, followed by the nanny who was trying to catch up with them. The older girl stopped suddenly when she saw the woman sitting in the chair, her big eyes filling with tears as her 4-year-old mind tried to process the figure that had appeared in her dreams every night. "Mommy?" she whispered, the word coming out like a breath filled with months of repressed longing. What happened next broke the hearts of everyone present. The mother stretched out her arms, and her daughters ran to her with desperate urgency, as if they feared she might disappear again. But it was the older girl's reaction that revealed the emotional complexity of the situation. After a few seconds, embracing her mother, she looked at the millionaire with tears in her eyes and said, "Mommy, this is the good man who took care of us. He gave us food and a warm room, and he was never mean to us." The child's words echoed through the office like an innocent but powerful statement about how love can exist even in the most complicated circumstances. The emotional wisdom that shone through in her voice deeply touched the hearts of all the adults, revealing that she understood, at her childish level, that both her mother and the millionaire had cared for her in different ways. During the weeks that followed, legal battles unfolded as emotions intensified for everyone involved. The local authorities, pressured by the corrupt construction company, began to question the millionaire's informal custody of the girls, creating a bureaucratic obstacle that threatened to separate them again from both of the figures who had become important in their lives. The millionaire faced the most difficult dilemma of his business life: to protect the girls and support the investigation that proved everyone's innocence. He made a decision that shocked his financial advisors. He liquidated a significant portion of his assets, including valued stocks and investments in cryptocurrencies, to fund not only the complete investigation of the corruption scheme, but also to create a reparations fund for all the affected families. The mother, in turn, faced a devastating emotional dilemma. Seeing her daughters happy and healthy under the care of the man whose family had benefited from her misfortune created an internal conflict that kept her awake every night. Part of her wanted to get the girls back immediately, but another part recognized that they had found stability and genuine affection that she, struggling to rebuild her life, might not be able to offer immediately. It was during a particularly tense afternoon, when everyone gathered again in the lawyer's office to discuss the next legal steps, that the third and definitive major twist was revealed. The lawyer had discovered something extraordinary while examining the personal documents that his wife had left and the papers that the girl's father had kept in the safe deposit box. "There's something you need to know," he said, spreading documents on the table with reverent care. "Your wife," he addressed the millionaire, "and the girl's father had not only discovered the same corruption scheme independently, they had made contact and were secretly working together to expose the entire criminal network." The revelation left everyone in absolute silence. The lawyer continued, his voice filled with emotion. "I found emails exchanged between them in the last months before their deaths. They had planned to join forces, using her financial resources and the evidence he had collected to ensure that all the affected families recovered their land and received adequate compensation." The last pieces of the puzzle fell into place when the lawyer revealed that both the millionaire's wife and the girl's father had left specific instructions on how their evidence should be used if something happened to them. It was as if they had foreseen that their premature departures could interrupt the plan, and they had left clues that only now made sense when connected. "They wanted you to meet," the lawyer said, looking alternately at the mother and the millionaire. "Not this way, not through the suffering that you have all faced, but they knew that together you could do much more justice than apart." The discovery completely transformed the dynamic between everyone involved. The mother's anger began to turn into understanding, while the millionaire's guilt found a path to redemption. Together, they could honor the memory of two people who had died trying to do the right thing. In the months that followed, something extraordinary happened. The shared pain turned into a transformative force that united two shattered families. The millionaire and the mother worked side by side to fully expose the corruption scheme, ensuring that all the affected families recovered their land and received fair compensation. The girls, who had been the catalyst for this discovery, gained not only a complete family again, but also the legitimate inheritance that had always belonged to them. The land their father had left was recovered and sold, creating an educational fund that would guarantee their future regardless of any other circumstances. In the surprising and satisfying ending that no one could have foreseen, The mother and the millionaire decided to form an unconventional family where the love born of shared suffering created bonds stronger than any adversity. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, but rather a union of two souls who had lost so much and found, in each other, the strength to start over. Justice was done against those who tried to steal the future of working-class families, proving that sometimes the greatest tragedies can turn into the most beautiful opportunities for a new beginning and redemption. The girls grew up knowing that they had been loved by four extraordinary people: two parents who left too soon, but left a legacy of courage, and two adults who turned pain into hope, creating a home where love prevailed over all circumstances. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you think of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.